including the minor party candidates. He even attacked Cuomo at one point or multiple times, saying, why doesn't he want to let the woman candidate in? Why doesn't he want to let the black candidate in? And so Cuomo eventually had to accept that. I think it's kind of a distraction, actually, if you ask me, because 5 of those candidates really have no chance of winning, and the 2 candidates who are ostensibly the serious contenders are going to get just a fraction of the airtime to talk about their views.
Yeah, Jimmy, who do you think is going to stand out in this contest?
Well, I think, to Bill's point, it's going to be Andrew Cuomo. We know that he's leading the polls. We know that he's been in government. We know that he's had probably the most comprehensive, in terms of positions, in terms of the amount of media he's put out, campaign of any of the civic candidates on the stage. So really, one person made the case to me, this just dilutes the field against him. This dilutes any attacks that might come against Cuomo. And I think that because of his front-runner status in this race, we're going to see lots of the other party candidates attack him. The other thing I think we'll see, which will be interesting, is we'll see some of the third-party candidates, the minor party candidates, people like Libertarian Warren Redlick, a Guilderland Town Board member, people like Mr. McMillan, people like Charles Barron, a New York City councilman who's running on the Freedom Party line. I think that they are going to really try and establish themselves substantively. They're going to show that they have a credible alternative, and they're going to say if these 2 major party candidates have tacked too far to the middle, if they are sounding themes that are not appealing, if you're a Democrat and you aren't excited by Cuomo's message, which is by most accounts to be very conservative, then I am here, I am a credible alternative, and I am more deserving of your vote than Mr. Cuomo.
I talked to 2 analysts today, and one of them said to me that the real person besides Carl Palladino that Andrew Cuomo needs to worry about is Charles Barron, who is a New York City councilman, and his candidacy he launched because the Democratic ticket is entirely composed of white people. There are no Hispanics, there are no blacks, there are no Asians. And he launched his campaign to give African Americans a choice. So he's likely to go after Andrew Cuomo. African Americans are an important constituency for the Democratic Party, so that's something that Andrew Cuomo is going to have to worry about. The other thing the analyst said to me is that this is a real opportunity for Carl Palladino to put the last 3 weeks of faux pas behind him, answer substantive questions in a substantive way. He can show himself as a serious contender and someone that's a real choice to Cuomo.
Or he can, but he has a pattern of trying to do that and failing. I mean, I don't know how many times people here have written stories about how this is when he turns a corner and focuses on substance instead of personalities or instead of kind of loose attacks. He doesn't seem to be able to have that level of discipline. It's part of, actually, I think it's part of his appeal is that he's not a polished, controlled, packaged candidate. He says whatever comes to his mind. He has a lot of opinions on things, and he tends to let them fly.
Yeah, his strategy for a while seemed to be to needle Cuomo. You know, he's like your younger brother. He's like, I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you, and just waiting for him to pop so he could just walk back and say, hey, that guy, he's unstable, he's not fit for government, vote Palladino. And it didn't quite work. Remember, we saw the shower flyer with Cuomo washing the special interest mud off of him. And today there was a new flyer released. It was based off of The Usual Suspects, the movie, and it showed Cuomo alongside Stephen Ratner, the financier who's under investigation, and many other people who have been under investigation as one of many peas in the pod. So will Palladino go substantive, James? Maybe. Will he try and needle, and will he throw an extra bomb and really try to get Cuomo to blow his top? Maybe. We don't know, and the Palladino campaign hasn't really led on with their strategy. I talked to Michael Caputo, the campaign manager, who, on another note, offered to resign today.
Yeah, that was big news.
And his resignation was not accepted by the candidate. And he said that, you know, that they're practicing, that he's being briefed by a policy team, and that they're not planning to do any mock debates. Normally what you do is you have someone stand in, you do a mock debate, but that they're really going to brief Carl on policy. They're going to have him get done. So we might see more of the approach that you described.
In fact, Carl Palladino is rolling out already a series of position papers. He has said to, in the media, said to us several times this week and before, well, what about the issues? I want to talk about the issues. He's going to use this opportunity, his campaign tells me, to talk about the issues, use this debate. Now, one of the problems, of course, is it's only 90 minutes, and you have 7 candidates. So how much Carl Palladino or any of the candidates are going to be able to talk about issues, it's going to be difficult. You're going to have to boil your positions down. The other thing I learned today from a number of analysts is that this is a situation where we may only have one gubernatorial debate in this campaign season. We've actually had, in the history of debates recently in our state, 2 gubernatorial election cycles where there were no debates at all. So we could end up with a situation where we only have one debate. The last time we had 3 debates was in 1982.
It's a long time with not a lot of talking. But, Bill, speaking of this, there's only one debate. There's a very limited amount of time for the candidates to get their message across. Do you think Palladino will be able to stay on message?
Well, I mean, his track record has been wandering off message. If he stays on message, I guess the format will work to his advantage because he'll only have a limited amount of time to talk. And so, you know, there's less opportunity for him to stray.
Well, speaking of kind of straying and doing things a little bit unconventionally, the New York Times piece today by Nick Comfestor, one of our colleagues, very interesting piece about the Palladino hug. I think we can all raise our hands. We've all gotten one here at the table.
I don't know if
You've
I
never
have.
gotten a Palladino hug?
I don't think I've been hugged either. I've been handshaked. I've been greeted. Carl Palladino was happy to see me on primary night in the Endicott building in Buffalo, and you were there. Excuse me, the Ellicott building.
He hugged me on primary night.
Well, that's, you know, they're more huggable, Caitlin, than we are.
This is part of, like, he comes across as a real person. I think there's no denying it. It's part of, to the extent that he is connecting with voters, that's part of his appeal. I mean, the polls indicate that it's kind of a limited appeal so far, but he has a kind of charisma that you don't get from a lot of candidates, because you get the feeling that he's just right out there. He's saying what he thinks, he's doing what he wants to do, and one of the things he wants to do is hug people, and that makes him feel more like somebody's dad or grandfather and less like this, you know, phony politician.
Reminds me of my uncle. It's exactly that. Bill, you hit it right on the head. And it resonates with people, especially as a contrast to Mr. Cuomo, who's highly managed, very tightly organized, always on message, and just really very controlling of both his persona and his positions and his words. So it does serve to play to Palladino's advantage, and it is just a very clear contrast.
It also shows, in many ways, how genuine Carl Palladino is. I attended a press conference with him a few weeks ago with a group of Tea Party members, and he hugged every single person in the room. And he said to them, "I'm so grateful you're here. Thank you for supporting me." He was very genuine. He wanted to express his appreciation. It's also important to note that Buffalo, in many ways, is much more of a Midwestern city than an East Coast city. And hugging in Buffalo is done much more frequently than it is done in New York City or in Boston or in Hartford.
Without the air kisses.
So it's not necessarily unusual. There are Buffalonians who hug frequently too, but it is, as Bill said, it makes him very different. He stands out from the seasoned politicians that we're all used to covering, whether it's Andrew Cuomo or it's Eliot Spitzer, Alan Hevesi, Tom DiNapoli, senators, congresspeople. Palladino isn't a politician, and this is just another example of him taking a different path.
Right. Well, he's not a politician, and he proved that point earlier in the week with his comments on gay marriage. That was certainly an implosion. It got a lot of headlines, but now gay marriage is very much back in the news.
Yes, the Empire State Pride Agenda, one of the leading gay rights advocacy organizations, held its annual dinner on Thursday. Mr. Palladino did not attend in light of some of those recent comments, but Andrew Cuomo did attend, and he said that he wants to be the governor who enacts and signs into law a bill legalizing same-sex marriage. This has been a big priority for the gay community. It, of course, was brought to a floor vote in the New York State Senate in December of 2009, where it failed by a 38 to 24 margin. So a very big margin. Cuomo said that he will lobby senators. He said that he wants to be the governor not just who sits around, not just who takes a position on marriage equality, but who puts it into law. And also, interestingly, because as your viewers have seen with Aaron Billups' series on the state Senate, there are lots of contested races, and it's unclear which party will control that chamber, which has been the bottleneck for this bill for years and years and years. It's passed the Assembly now 3 times, the first time in 2007. Senator Dean Skelos, the minority leader, the top Republican in that chamber, committed to bring the bill to the floor if Republicans take the majority. This means there will be another up and down vote. There will be an opportunity for lobbyists on both sides of the issue, both for and against, to lobby individual members and try to either reduce that margin or get to the needed 32 vote threshold.
And in fact, we may very well see a change within the Republican conference. The last time this issue came up for a vote, it was a free vote within the Republican conference. but all 30 Republicans voted no. Dean Skelos himself is personally opposed to same-sex marriage. However, we know that there are other Republican senators who are more on the fence, and that part of what we saw the last time when this vote came up was the harsh partisanship within the chamber, and that sort of swamped looking at this from a moral and an ethical and a philosophical standpoint. We also saw Joe Adabo, who you profiled earlier tonight. He was the first Democrat to cast a no vote, and many people believe that created a cascade effect, and people who were sitting on the fence decided, well, if he's going to vote no, I can safely vote no.
You mentioned, though, that the week started with Carl Palladino making comments on this issue, and I feel like that was probably the worst moment of a pretty rocky campaign, because this is an issue where he had an opportunity to maybe cut into Andrew Cuomo's support. Because Andrew Cuomo, although there are a lot of people in this state who support marriage equality, and the trend is heading in that direction, I'd still say there's a majority of New Yorkers who aren't fully on board with it. They'd probably go for a candidate whose position, like Carl Palladino's, is more for legal equality without using the word marriage. And yet, when he started to speak about the issue, he was reading a script provided for him by someone else, a conservative rabbi, and it included really inflammatory statements, some of which he said, some of which he didn't say. But they said things like, he referenced the idea that children were being brainwashed into becoming homosexuality. And that really offends, it certainly offends gay rights people, and I think it rubs the majority of New Yorkers the wrong way. And so it ended up putting him in the corner as an extremist on an issue where he could have, like I say, carved into Cuomo's support.
It also, that the episode that occurred in Brooklyn on Sunday was yet another episode that will really energize the Democratic base. We've seen this with gay rights. We've also seen it with abortion. One of the issues a few weeks ago was, could Andrew Cuomo energize Democrats to come out and vote in large numbers, particularly in New York City and the suburbs? These types of issues, what we used to call wedge issues, energize people, and they say, I'm going to go out and I'm going to vote. I have to. In a way, Carl Palladino has done for Andrew Cuomo what Andrew Cuomo needed to do: energize the base by demonizing Palladino.
And as a result, Cuomo's campaign has, where it looked like it was ramping up, where after that first week of Palladino's post-primary victory, where Cuomo seemed to be caught off guard, he didn't want to directly engage Palladino, he started to ramp up, he started to directly engage, and now he seems to be scaling a little bit back. He's going back to the property tax issue. He's releasing another ad. And it'll be interesting to see. They made a big show here in Albany about gearing up the coordinated campaign of the New York State Democratic Party. I'll be curious to see whether or not there are lots of efforts to boost turnout, or whether Cuomo will go ahead with his original strategy, which was to try and win over independent voters, win with a large mandate, and claim kind of this across-the-board Cuomonian coalition, big tent approach.
What do you think, Bill? Do you think Cuomo can sit back at this point? Has Palladino done himself enough damage?
Well, as we saw in the primary, the polls missed Palladino's support. The last poll that came out before the primary showed it being close with Lazio ahead. It wasn't close. Palladino blew him out. And that's because people turned out for Palladino who normally don't vote at all, at least in the Republican primary. So there is a danger. I'd say it's a small danger, but there is a danger if the Democrats and if Cuomo is complacent about this, that there'll be this kind of hidden turnout for Palladino. I'd say the likeliest chance is that Cuomo will win by a smaller than expected margin, and it'll feel like a weaker mandate. It'll feel like a lackluster win, and that would damage him going forward.
And for Palladino, he needs to get back to the core issues that attract people to him: cutting taxes, creating jobs, getting the economy back on track. One of the things several analysts said to me today is they're struck by the last 3 weeks. We really haven't been talking as a society about the key issues that are facing New York. We've been talking about side issues. When you ask voters, what's the #1 issue you're concerned about that you want the next governor to deal with? It's jobs. #2 is the economy, and #3 is property taxes. Those are 3 subjects neither candidate has talked much about until just a few days ago when Andrew Cuomo rolled out his property tax cap initiative. We've been talking about same-sex marriage, we've been talking about abortion, we've been talking about Carl Palladino